everyone, join me, Megan Rinks.
And me, Melissa DeMonts, for Don't Blame Me, But Am I Wrong?
Each week, we deliver 4 fun-filled shows.
In Don't Blame Me, we tackle our listeners' dilemmas with hilariously honest advice.
Then we have But Am I Wrong, which is for the listeners that didn't take our advice. Plus, we share our hot takes on current events.
Then tune in to see you next Tuesday for our listener poll results from But Am I Wrong?
And finally, wrap up your week with Fisting Friday, where we catch up and talk all things pop culture.
Listen to Don't Blame Me, But Am I Wrong on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. New episodes every Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday.
That's what I want to share with other people, that you don't need to be a professional or have some sort of natural gift or aptitude for creativity. We all have within us the power to create beauty and to live inside it. And I think we all deserve it as well.
You're listening to the Good Dirt Podcast. This is a place where we dig into the nitty-gritty of sustainable living through food, fashion, and lifestyle.
And we're your hosts, Mary and Emma Kingsley, the mother and daughter founder team of Lady Farmer. We're sowing seeds of slow living through our community platform, events, and online marketplace.
We started this podcast as a means to share the wealth of information and quality conversations that we're having in our world as we dream up and deliver ways for each of us to live into the new paradigm, one that is regenerative, balanced, and whole.
We want to put the microphone in front of the voices that need to be heard the most right now. The farmers, the dreamers, the designers, and the doers.
So come cultivate a better world with us. We're so glad you're here. Now, let's dig in.
Good morning, Emma. How you doing?
Pretty good.
I'm seeing you sitting in a very organized space this morning.
Yes.
Tell me about that.
So my office room, which is not just an office, it's also my sewing space, my creative space, and also the dumping space for everything that I don't know where else it goes, because I'm not naturally a very organized person and I have a hard time getting rid of stuff. So this office room has been very cluttered and full of piles for a really long time. And it's been a source of anxiety for me. And there have been a few rounds of even people coming to help me with it. But finally, you helped me push through the finish line. It's really back at blank slate phase. I'm excited to sort of rebuild a space that's going to work for me.
Tell me how it feels when you walk into it now, contrasted to how it felt 2 or 3 weeks ago when you were at the height of frustration over it.
Well, I feel a sense of pride and a sense of relief and a sense of calm and a sense of possibility. How blank spaces do wonders for the mental state.
Yes, absolutely. I think the sense of relief and calm is really key. I mean, that affects your nervous system.
Yeah.
When you walk into a room and there's unfinished business, it's agitating.
Mm-hmm. It's like open tabs in your brain.
So anyway, I'm glad you have gotten to this point, and
Thank
now
you,
you're
Mother.
at a point of possibility.
Really couldn't have done it without you.
So I had my own little breakthrough with clutter last week when I got the word of textile waste drop-off. And I actually talk about that some in this upcoming episode, because this episode has to do with space organization and design according to our own needs and values. And it's quite interesting. So yeah, our guest today is Zandra Zuraw, and she's the founder of Slow Style Home, which is an interior design coaching platform for people looking to create a beautiful and meaningful home without spending a ton of money or having to hire a designer or any of that.
She's currently writing a book about her slow style approach to design to be released in spring 2025. She's also the host of the popular podcast Slow Style Home, which has over 1 million downloads. She's with us on the Good Dirt today to talk about her slow style philosophy and its underpinnings in slow living. Her step-by-step framework for a slow style approach to decorating, how slow style helps us create homes that align with our values, and using nature as inspiration in our design choices.
So, here is Zandra Zuraw of Slow Style Home.
Thank you so much for having me on the Good Dirt podcast. I feel very simpatico with your approach. My expertise is not in the outdoors as much as it is in the indoors, but I love my gardens and playing in the dirt. So I love everything that you talk about. My name is Zandra Zuraw, and I am the founder of Slow Style Home, an interior design coaching platform. So in other words, I work with regular people. I don't work with interior designers. I teach regular people how to create a beautiful, meaningful home using a framework I've developed over the past 11 years or so. It's a step-by-step process, and I call it slow style. I am not a trained interior designer, and I think that's okay because most people aren't either, and we sometimes just need real advice from people who've been in the trenches. I'm just a homeowner and I've been an apartment renter too, so I understand both. I'm someone who has always thought of herself and her home as a place of refuge, self-reflection, and creative expression. Therefore, I like to call myself a self-taught decorator who has spent 30 years developing my own signature style through trial and error, studying the masters, and learning everything I can on the subject. I've had to move a lot. And every time I was trying out something new and moving to a new place, I found that creating a meaningful, inspiring home environment in which I could grow was always the constant. So it took me a little while to come to the realization that the concept of home and how to create one, that's where my passion lies. And that's what I want to share with other people, that you don't need to be a professional. We all have within us the power to create beauty and to live inside it. And I think we all deserve it as well.
This is so exciting. I love this so
Yes.
much. I'm someone who's in a constant state of, "Oh, I just can't wait to get to that room. I think I want to paint this here." Or I love wallpaper and I have lots of things hanging, but I want to put them up, but I don't know where I want them.
Yeah.
Personally, I feel like I'm someone who could definitely benefit from your service.
Been there.
Go ahead.
Still there in many ways. Right.
Yeah.
I'm always wanting to do something.
Yeah. And I think being inundated with imagery of really beautiful interiors. A lot of times it's movies or little reels or TikToks set to music. So
Right.
that really hits more to our emotions. We're
Point.
inundated with this imagery all the time. So it's easy to feel in a constant state of lack or
Right.
a real feeling of, oh, I'm so far from that.
Right.
And that's a frustrating place to be.
Absolutely, it is. 100%.
Yeah, and the way we so often talk about slow living is how it feels, zeroing in on how something feels, like how a room feels or your home or a space. That, to me personally, it just feels like a constant process. It's ever changing. I don't know if I ever get to a space that feels really stable.
Yeah. Well, that's a great question. And I guess I would flip it on its head a little bit and say, good. I don't think it should feel done. I think it should feel good for now and good for what I need in the moment.
Yeah.
I would be bored if I was done. I would start to feel like my home doesn't
Right.
reflect who I'm becoming because I'm learning and changing and growing. Even, I'm 53, but I think I'm going to be learning and changing, growing for a long time. That I want my home to evolve as well. So I don't ever encourage people or lead people toward this sort of we're done now point in time. I like I'm going to get it to where it feels good point in time. And that might mean that, oh, I still have one piece of furniture that I don't love, but that's okay. I'm looking forward. When I'm out and about, or I'm antiquing, or I'm thrifting, or whatever, something will come. So serendipity will happen, and I'll find the perfect thing. I think you learn so much about what the space needs and what you need for it to function well when you take your time. But don't put off the final layers. In other words, the things you want to hang on the wall just because you haven't gotten around to the wallpaper yet. Don't put off hanging the mirror or putting up the tassels in front of your windows because you haven't found the curtains you like yet. Go ahead and put yourself, your personality, what's lighting you up in the moment, put that up now and live within it, live within that beauty as you go to find the perfect piece of furniture. Or let's say 5 years later, you need to replace your couch or whatever.
Yeah. I like the idea of embracing the thought that as dynamic, creative human beings, we're always looking to the next thing and the next idea, implementing that, or going for the next look. It is fun if you can embrace it that way instead of just, I have to scramble around and get on Amazon and, go here and go there and get the stuff so I can finish this room.
Right. Then it feels like
that's
a chore.
not a good feeling.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Getting ready to have family for the holidays. I want this room finished, which is kind of a dead end, actually. I've done that in the past in the pursuit of being finished with a space. I have ended up not liking what I ended up with. And then not feeling like I could change it for a long time because I just did this.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Then the guilt kicks in.
So it's kind of frustrating. But to back up a little bit, just to create a place to start this whole very fascinating discussion, I want to hear what you have to say about how to go about creating that vision of the aesthetic that speaks to you.
Back to your story and how you started doing this, and maybe an aha moment that kind of led you down this path.
So I've had many different careers, spent a lot of money on college and graduate school, and never found what I really wanted to do until I realized it was right in front of me and I was living in it. For a specific aha moment, like many women, I had children, still worked when I had my first child. My second child has some major intellectual disabilities and was also very sick and in the hospital a lot in his first year of life. By the end of that first year, I was like, I gotta stay home. There's just too much to do to also be juggling work. We were also moving. So it was a little bit perfect in that we were moving because of my husband's job. So it was a good time for me to step away. But at the same time, it was really scary because not only am I losing my work identity or my me time, which is now when you have kids, work becomes your me time. I was moving into a neighborhood I didn't know anybody, a new place. We were moving from Pennsylvania to Massachusetts. And so it was really scary. My son is now going on 2. And then by the time I got him into preschool, I was really ready to have something for myself. My mental health needed it. My energy needed it. I needed an outlet. And I know this is familiar to so many people, especially parents with little children, where they just feel like they've you lose yourself in the very beginning. And I realized what I really needed to do was something with my hands. I felt best when I was painting a wall, digging up a garden bed, or learning how to hang wallpaper, rearranging a room. And so this was before I started my podcast, before I committed to, I need to be in interior design somehow. It was that need to do something with my hands that I think a lot of people recognize. There's so much satisfaction we get from accomplishing something challenging and having an idea in our head, just this little germ of an inspirational idea, and making an entire vision in your mind or on paper, and then seeing it come to fruition because you made it happen. It's incredibly satisfying.
So how did you begin it? This adventure?
Oh, I will keep this one short. I met a woman in preschool. Her son also had some developmental challenges. We bonded over that. She's one of the most creative people I'd ever met, very talented. And we both were in the same spot, and we were just like, we need to do something. So we just started making things together, did the craft circuit, got into juried shows, making and selling things. It was probably exactly what I needed at the time, but it wasn't becoming a scalable business. Anything handmade, you know how long it takes. And therefore, you
Yep.
almost never get your money out of the hours that you put in. So we started a podcast to talk about the meaning behind, the substance behind style and beauty and living within it. She wanted to move away from that and do something else. And I was ready to take this on myself and commit completely to the interiors because my focus was kind of all over the place. It was on lifestyle, gardening, fashion, and food.
We can relate.
Yeah. So once I took it on myself, I really dug into it and felt very committed. And I've been doing it ever since.
So when someone comes to you, your client, like talk a little bit about where they are and how you start them. Like, yeah.
Well, that's the vision question that you were asking. How does one come up with a vision in the first place, which is such a good question. So a lot of people are already creative and they are excited, motivated. They have ideas. They know they want to do things, but there's so many ideas and there's so much influencing us through social media in particular. But like you said, magazines, TV, whatever. The ideas are flooding, right? We have Pinterest, like 500 Pinterest boards of ideas about bathrooms or whatever. We start to get overwhelmed. There are so many choices to make, and we have no idea where to start. So a lot of people come to me in that boat. Other people might come to me, they've lived in a house for a very long time. They're bored with it. They haven't changed much over the years, but maybe they've collected a lot of things and they're really having a hard time separating. Do I keep this for its sentimentality or do I let it go because I really don't like it anymore? How do I deal with the emotional stuff of getting rid of things? But then also, who am I now? I've had the same stuff for years. How do I be brave and actually paint the wall magenta because it's been white for 30 years? So those are two types of clients that might come to me. So they're in different spaces, headspaces. Both cases, we have to start with a vision. And that's because if you immediately just start, you land on a gorgeous spread in a magazine, or you've saved a bunch of reels from Instagram and go, this is it. I love this. The next thing you're going to do is start searching for products that match what you see. And searching for products is the last thing you should be doing, not the first. When you start searching for products, very quickly, you're doing a Google search and there's so many results that you have to narrow it down to, oh, do I want wood or marble? Oh, or do I want, modern farmhouse or do I want boho? Do I want 3 doors or 2 doors? Like things that they'll matter at the end. They don't matter right now. And what you're doing is you're pigeonholing yourself into making decisions before you have any idea how you want the room to feel and what you want to experience in it. You're just going, oh, okay, I guess I like modern farmhouse. I'll pick that one. And then, like you were saying, you realize, oh, I've spent all this money on all these products and I've redone this whole room and I don't really like it. Now I'm stuck with it for 10 years because I feel guilty and I don't want to throw it away. So that's why a vision is so crucial. So how do you develop a vision? There are lots of different ways. The more confidence you have in trusting your own gut and sense of style, the more abstract your vision can be. But when you're just starting out, I think it's really helpful to have something concrete, your starting point, your source of inspiration. One that I think is really rich with inspiration is a place you've traveled to. So I might take somebody through a questionnaire or a one-on-one conversation. I'll say, tell me about when you were in the Italian Riviera. I'll ask them things like, what did you see? What did you smell? What did you taste? What did you hear? Describe what was the place on your vacation that you just sunk into and you were like, this is gorgeous. I could spend a long time here. It might be the deck of your Airbnb, or it might be the inside of a hotel room. It might be the inside of a restaurant or a bar that you went to. It could be the beach that you're lying on. Let's take some colors and some patterns that we see from that place. Let's remember what the music sounded like, what the food tasted like, what the smells were, and make sure we're covering all of our senses and bring those things in as well. But when you look at your vacation photos from the perspective of looking for design and inspiration, you will start to see patterns. You'll start to see, oh, there's a pattern in the ocean. Oh, I like that ripple pattern. And I like that the waves aren't one color. They're actually like 3 or 4 different shades of blue or blue-green. I really like how soft the sand was under my feet. I'm going to start looking for some couches or something I'm going to sit on that has that sand color. So this is a broad, generic example. We can get much more specific, and I would with somebody, but that's what I mean about creating a vision. It's tapping into an experience you've already had and actually remembering what it looked like and felt like, as opposed to just thinking about, oh, I had a great conversation, which is awesome. That's exactly why you should have a fabulous home, to have a great conversations and connections with humans. But I don't think we tend to look at our photographs or think of our experiences from a designer's perspective. And that's what I'm trying to teach people to do.
Well put, I think. And a few things that are coming to me are like, I don't know where I picked this up, but something about good design or something that's designed well is, in my experience, that you don't notice the design. You just notice how you feel in it.
Yeah.
It's very pleasing for some reason, but you don't really know why.
Yes.
So I think that's what you're getting at with pulling together your interiors. I love the idea of not starting with a product or trying to copy something that you see just because it works in a picture.
Yeah.
There might be a lot of reasons why it's working in that picture.
Right.
And
that
if
we
you, like,
can't
pull apart
replicate.
the end of thing. Yeah.
Oh, they have a fabulous exposed brick wall that I don't have. Oh, well, that's going to change the feel of the room immediately, even if I buy the exact same furniture.
Right.
But that idea
Right.
of design being really good design, you don't actually even notice the design. A lot of the designers I've interviewed on the podcast, my favorite ones are the ones that they themselves will say, I don't want anyone to come in here and know that you've hired a designer. Which is interesting because there's a whole other group of designers that definitely want you to know that they put their mark all over the place. That's, in their mind, that's why you hired them. But I think the really good designers understand that real human beings live in houses. You need to allow a little bit of room for the space to evolve and for the people who live there to put their own mark on it.
I grew up in the 60s and 70s, and many a living room I visited, like in my friends' homes, or was closed off, and the furniture would be covered in plastic
Yes.
because you weren't supposed to sit on it.
Right.
The furniture was straight from the furniture store that
Yep.
was downtown on Broad Street,
Right.
and that was considered beautiful and proper, actually.
Right. When you put plastic on the furniture, the idea was you were taking care of it. You had spent good money and you're like, now, okay, nobody's sitting on it because we're not good enough for our own furniture. So I get the taking care of it part. I highly encourage people to learn to really value what they have, buy the best they can possibly afford, and then take care of it. But we have to always remember, why are we taking care of it? We're taking care of it so we humans can enjoy it, live in it, create memories, and feel connected to one another. So yeah, you got to take the plastic off.
I have an anecdote from what you were just talking about, Mom. I have a very vivid memory of when I was little, looking at a magazine. I don't remember what company, but getting a mailer or something to the house, and that it was an advertising campaign for furniture. And the line was, "It's time to start living in your living room," or something.
Oh,
I was
yeah.
like, I really didn't get it. And I remember I was like, Mom, what does this mean? Living in your living room? I don't know.
Right.
And you were like, oh, some people just don't go in their living room.
Yeah, it's true.
Emma, you came of age in the 90s
Yeah.
and that was the era when the kitchen and the room where everybody hung out was connected.
The open
thing.
floor
So
plan
if-
was new.
Right. It was called the keeping room. Does that ring a bell to you?
I've heard of the keeping room. We would call it the
keeping room.
formal living room.
The keeping room was more like the family room.
Oh,
The
okay.
living room was the room that nobody ever went in.
Yes.
And so here I am now in my supposedly retirement years, living in this 200-year-old farmhouse.
Wow.
And like I said a minute ago, the task never seems done. And now I'm trying to integrate so much from my parents' home. They've now passed, and we had to disperse all of these things. This is pretty recent, so I'm very much trying to still go through things. The upper level of my barn is full of all these things. I want to pick your brain about stuff and clutter and sentimentality and memories.
Yeah.
Help
Well,
me.
this is a big question. And it's loaded with memory, guilt,
Yep.
sentimentality, all of it, loss, sadness, all everything. So we'll just probably scratch the surface here, but I would say that I always like to remind people that if you let something go, you're not letting the person go. Your memory of the person is forever. That's not something that gets erased from your brain just because you let go of the armoire or the rocking chair or whatever it is. So if you truly don't love it, if aesthetically, you just don't, you've tried and it just doesn't work, I want to give everyone permission, let it go. It's okay. But I think to your point, trying to make it work first is a good idea financially, but also to see if you can incorporate the past life of someone you actually know and love, not just an antique, a random antique, but an heirloom. See if you can incorporate it. And oftentimes it does involve reupholstering something, repainting something, even like chopping the legs off a table to make it a coffee table. I mean, you can be as crazy as you want in terms of how you change it up. But then bring it back to that vision we were talking about. If you have this vision in place and your inspirational starting point, you might be surprised to see how a piece that you thought didn't belong, it was the wrong era, the wrong style, the wrong color, that when you bring it into the space, it actually makes the space feel more authentic. The beautiful homes we see in magazines or on Instagram that really work are richly layered and collected over time. They have exactly those kinds of oddball pieces in them. And so I think that keeping one or two things that you've inherited are really the things that kind of make the room sing unexpectedly. But do get rid of the rest. Get rid of the rest. You don't have to hold on to it.
Permission is very important. And sometimes permission's hard to come by, either from yourself or other family members.
Yes.
That permission piece is pretty hard. But, not many people have room in their houses for all the things that their people used to have.
That's right.
And this brings us to the next topic. We're in an era where so many things are made and manufactured and presented to us at low prices.
Yes.
So it's easy to acquire things that we think are the look, style, or aesthetic.
Yep.
And have it right there. You can go to Home Goods or Hobby Lobby.
Anything,
any of these places, and you walk in and there's just rows and rows of stuff that give you an instant look.
So it's like we've got all this stuff we've inherited that actually does have some value. It's probably well made. It could be the funky thing that just puts the room together when you only have one of them. But then on the other hand, you've got all this cheap stuff coming in. Disposable decor is how I refer to it. And I think the reasons we're in the situation we're in are probably pretty obvious. You've talked about similar things on your show about supply chain and the idea that things that are cheaply made are the labor may not be fair wages may not be being paid, or good working conditions. The materials themselves may be taken from the natural resources, may be procured through ways that are very damaging to the environment and not replenishing. Then you've got the cost of shipping it and the cost of storing it, and not just the cost of it, but the environmental cost of it, shipping things over in large containers over the ocean. It's all very worrisome, I think, because we have access to so much inspiration and it's so constantly changing. We look at something that a famous personality has done, or maybe a famous designer, and we think, I want that. And then all of a sudden, because people are posting it on social media and in magazines, for the manufacturers in this space to go, I'm going to recreate that. I'm going to make the macrame hanging. No human has made it. Maybe it was made in a sweatshop. I'm going to sell them. And it's only going to be $25 for this huge macrame hanging that's hanging on the wall that people used to make by hand. The problem, besides all the supply chain stuff I talked about, is that because it's this quick idea of changing things up and what's hip and happening now, we get bored with it in 6 months. What I say to people when they're in Target or wherever they are and they've got their cart, and listen, I am just as guilty as everybody else. I don't mean to be on a soapbox. I am just as enamored with the cheap prices and the instant gratification of putting something in my cart. But when you're in one of those situations and you think it's just a throw pillow, it's just $20. Ask yourself, does this deserve the space it's going to take up in my home? Does it deserve to be in my home? Does it deserve the extra storage I'm going to have to carve out for it when I need to change it out for the season? Does it deserve the time and attention and care I'm going to need to clean it or to repair it? Does it do anything for the vision that I already have established in that room? Is it enhancing it? Or is it sort of going, oh, I want to swap things out because I'm bored? Especially with stuff that's mass produced, you have the luxury of stopping and going, you know what? I'm going to think about it. I'm going to sleep on it. And if I can't stop thinking about this thing, and if I just love it, and if it's worth me driving back to the store and getting it, then okay, maybe I'll get it. But because it's going to be there tomorrow, or you can find it on Amazon, you really don't need impulse purchasing. There's no reason for it anymore. It's a dopamine hit, and that's a whole other mental health thing we need to discuss. But I get why we do it. No shame, I get it. But truly, you can talk yourself off the ledge and put it back. It's very different when you're antiquing and you're like, oh my, this is one of a kind and I'm not going to get it again and I better pick it before somebody else does. That's very different.
I love that mental exercise of, does this deserve the space in my home, in my midst, in my psyche?
In my emotional space. It takes up space, not just physically.
Absolutely. The older I get, the more I realize that it's not only about the impulse of the moment, but I'm going to be dealing with this object for a long time. Right now in my life, I'm dealing with a lot of objects that were acquired in just that frame of mind.
Yeah.
You could say, well, just get rid of it. But here's what really gets in my way. Being co-host of the Good Dirt podcast and lady farmer and studying all this supply chain stuff, plastic and waste, it's very difficult for me to let go of things that I know are going to just end up in the landfill.
Yep.
So I spend a lot of time and get myself twisted up in knots.
Yes.
Trying to figure out how to get stuff out of my way that I don't really want anymore without just, you know, just adding to the world's pile of waste.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you an experience yesterday. I got a notification of a drop-off that's going to happen near us at this store. And they're taking textile waste.
Okay.
And I lit up because I have bags of scrappy stuff that I didn't want to throw in the trash can. It also said, bring your clothes and shoes and whatever you want to get rid of. We'll try to keep it out of the landfill. That really unleashed something in me. I spent several hours yesterday just pulling stuff out because I was free.
Yes.
They said they were going to try to keep stuff out of the landfill. So that's my permission slip.
I love that.
I have a huge amount of bags now that are ready to go to this thing. Drop off is on Friday between 1 and 6.
Right.
And I'm going to be the first one there.
Right.
With my truckload, literally my truckload. That's a real hang up for me. I don't want to make trash.
Yes. I am very sympathetic to that and feel the exact same way. I recently discovered a company called Trashie, Trashie. You buy bags, they're pretty big, and you fill them as much as you can with clothing or fabrics. They have 3 different streams they put them in. The first thing they do, if it's clothing, shoes, or jewelry in good condition, they make sure it goes to people who need it. The other stream is they recycle it. A lot of fabrics can be recycled and made into different things. And then I forget what the third stream is, but they are doing what most recycling centers in the country aren't doing because lack of funding or lack of people to do the work or motivation. They're doing the hard work of employing people to manually sort through things. That's the conundrum with the recycling situation. To make this stuff useful, to be reused, you need humans to determine each piece, whether or not, everything from is the cap of the bottle recyclable as well as the bottle, to clothing, and
Yeah.
how much can this be reused and what is it made out of. So I was really excited about that company. Trashy is the name of that company. I get no kickback from them, just saying.
Thank you. To send you the bags and then you ship the bags back.
To
Is that
them.
how that works?
Yeah, so I think the bags might be $20, and you stuff them, and then with the bag comes the printing label. Then you just drop it off at UPS. Companies like that, I want to find more of them. None of us really wants the stuff to go into a landfill. And also, I don't know if you have Savers where you are, but that's a chain of thrift stores. And oh my gosh, our local Savers, I mean, piles and piles and piles of stuff people drop off every day. And I am pretty sure not all of it is going to where they say it's going. It's really hard to know. Is this really staying out of a landfill? Is it really being used for the local community, or is it being shipped halfway around the world? I don't know. So I try to find companies that have a little bit more transparent on their websites about what they're actually doing with these things.
How much of when you work with clients, how much of your work is on this decluttering specifically and reorganization? Because I know the designing and finding things and putting things in a space is like the really fun part.
Yes.
But it's really hard to do that.
Yeah, that's a great question. The answer is I have to meet people where they're at. If someone is super excited to redo a room that's full of a bunch of stuff that doesn't belong there, and they are not motivated to declutter first, I will say, that's fine. We will put everything that doesn't belong there in another room, but you're going to have to face it at some point. Sometimes people really do need something beautiful to step into and to feel like, oh, I accomplished it. And oh, look how good I feel now that I've done that. Now I have the energy to go deal with my stuff. Other people realize, you know what, this is pointless to do anything until I declutter. Let's just get it over with. I'll do either one, depending on where the person is at on their headspace. But frankly, we're always going to have to deal with it at some point. And often what happens for people that say, I just can't bear to declutter, I'm just going to move everything to another room, is that I'll say, okay, you're not allowed to buy anything new until we've scoured your home for pieces to fulfill this vision. Now you got to go into that room full of clutter and start going through it. So you're going to have to face it at some point. What I don't recommend is trying to live in the clutter and redo something in the same room at the same time. You can't see or think straight if you've got the room full of clutter. It has to all go out to a different room while you're working. I mean, I'd prefer not even stay in a corner because we're not trained designers. It's very hard for us to ignore that visual chaos and still be creative and inspired and visionary. So we got to get it out.
Yeah, I love the idea of shopping your house. If you need a piece, look around and see what you already got. And there's so many instances you find something you can just move to the room and it works great.
And isn't it so satisfying? You're like, oh, look at me. I'm so clever. I love that. That's a great feeling.
Before we get too far off it, because this is particularly personal to me, I want to stay on the decluttering.
Sure.
What's your strategy for decluttering when you work with someone?
Yeah. Most of us know the 3-pile system, which is things you're going to keep, things you're going to donate, and things you're going to toss, right? What you might need me for is the maybe pile. The stuff that you just couldn't force into one of those 3 other piles. So now this is what you were left over. So I actually have like a flow chart that I use as a teaching tool to help people go through the decision process. Basically, things that are in a maybe pile, I think you can sort out into 3 different categories. One is the aspirational things that you own. These are the things that you can't seem to let go of because the part of you wants some sort of life or experience that you've attached to this object. The easiest example is the pair of jeans that we don't fit into anymore, but we have an aspiration of losing weight to fit into them. But this can certainly go for anything. It can go for your wedding china that you never use. But imagine having great dinner parties. And so maybe someday, or it could be a candle. It could be a super expensive, ridiculously expensive candle that you never light because there hasn't yet been a special occasion. So those are the aspirational things you're having trouble dealing with. The other things are the practical things like, but it's perfectly good. Why would I get rid of it? Do you have 5 of them and you only need 1? If it's perfectly good, it could still go to somebody else and be useful, but you really do only need 1. So that's an easy kind of fix, but a harder fix is, well, what if I need it someday? So you just have to get very clear with yourself and say, if I haven't used it in the last 5 years, it's time to let it go because it's costing me more emotionally, mentally, physically to hold on to it than to let it go. The third category of things in a maybe pile are the obligatory things. These are the sentimental things given to us that we would feel guilty getting rid of. And so then there's a whole sort of question, step-by-step question things I take people through to deal with the guilt. Decluttering takes time and some emotional investment to deal with that last pile. I really think the first level of decluttering is easy. You know if it's going to donate or it's going in the trash or you're going to keep it. By donate, I mean give it to a friend and just not throw it in the trash, essentially, but get rid of it. And hopefully those are the 2 biggest piles, not the one where the stuff is going in the trash. It's that last layer of stuff that you just don't know what to do with. And there are plenty of little tips that people have about, put it in a box for 6 months. If you haven't opened the box, don't open it now and just send it out to Goodwill. That certainly works. But there are more subtle questions, complaints, and fears that people have about attachments to their stuff that I would take people through to help them declutter. So let me give you some resources. Peter Walsh is my number 1 guru. I've had him on my podcast several times. His book, Let It Go, is specifically for people who are clearing out their parents' stuff. That's, I think, his most recent book. There's another one that says something like, does this clutter make my butt look fat? Which is fabulous and funny. He is so attuned to the emotional weight we carry when we have too much stuff. I really like that aspect of his teachings. Another person that I really love, actually, all these people I've had on the show, so you can look up podcast episodes of them, is Tracy McCubbin. Her website is called Declutterfly, FLY, like a buzzing bee fly. So she's got great resources, but I really recommend her book. And then another person is Monica Leed, Leed, of Simply Spaced. And she also has a great book that I've taken lots of tips from. The primary focus of what I work with clients on is not decluttering. I really do spend a lot of time talking about it with people because, like you said, I know I need to declutter first. It's overwhelming. So I do a lot of that work as well.
Tell us what your definition of a slow home would be. You talk about a slow home. How does that overlap or differentiate from slow living? If it does, we always ask our guests, what does slow living mean to you?
Right.
So in your case, I'd like for you to merge those.
So to me, slow living is the broader category that slow home can fit into, slow fashion, slow agriculture. It means not being in a rush to achieve results only for the sake of checking off a box or putting another notch on a belt. If you want to create a beautiful garden, the best way to do that, in my opinion, is to be fully present in the choosing of the plants, digging of the soil, and tending of the bed for the current season. Just enjoying the process as opposed to rushing through it or pouring a lot of money into it to get this bam, beautiful result in a short amount of time. Gardening is something I do. It's not something I have. The same goes for creating a beautiful, meaningful home. You don't have to buy everything at once. And you don't have to make every decision at once. Frankly, you really shouldn't. I don't think you're going to be happy with the results. You start with what you have and learn from that. You add your layers over time. It's really the only way you're going to have a home that feels collected and celebrates all of who you are, who you've been, and who you want to become. You can't buy that. You can't go to the store and buy overnight. In slowing down, we begin to realize that home isn't just a place. It's experiencing life over time in a single location. Slow living refers to slowing down our engagement with consumerism. So buying the best quality you can afford so that it lasts longer, and buying used or vintage to keep things out of landfills, learning how something's made, by whom, and how it gets transported to us. That whole cradle to grave thing we were talking about earlier, when it comes to products, is also part of not just slow living, but certainly slow style home.
Oh, thank you very much. I appreciate this statement. Home is more than a place. And when we talk about living into the seasons, slow living through the seasons, we're also talking about slow living through the seasons of life
Yes.
and the phases. This has to do with your slow home
Absolutely.
style.
Yes, 100 sure. Yeah.
What do you have to say about a disconnect, I think, between what we see online as far as like cleanliness and neatness and perfectly well designed interiors, and then like what reality is? And I know some people just are like really neat people and their houses might always look like the inside of a magazine. But I think in general, it's probably not like that.
Yeah.
So I guess, do you have anything to say about what's the balance between having a livable space that fills us with joy and doesn't overwhelm us versus constantly working to like declutter that space and clean that space, and just the stress that comes with that? Because that's
Yeah.
something that I don't think I've figured out yet, that
Yeah.
balance.
Well, and I think honestly, what you're basically talking about are organizational systems, and we're constantly tweaking them because either they don't work in the first place very well, or something's changed and therefore the system kind of breaks down, the one we have in place. Mostly what changes is the kids get older, or there's now a new puppy, or I don't know, something happened where you had a leak in the roof and now you can't use that room. I mean, systems have to change because life happens. But my goal is to take the friction out of the daily chores of life as much as possible. So making everything as easy as possible so I can spend more time lolling on the couch or watching Netflix or sitting with a book and a glass of wine. So organizational systems, they're not about color coding and labels and beautiful bins. I mean, that stuff is great. And I'm like a crow when I go to the container store. I get it. I love it too. But those systems are never going to work if you haven't already figured out where is the friction happening. So it's not really rocket science. Everything needs to have a place, and that place needs to be easily accessible. And there has to be a gap of room left in that place to add something new. So if you think about, okay, I'm going to sort through the clothes and I'm going to put all of the off-season clothes in bins or whatever. If you buy a bin that just barely fits all of your sweaters, next year when you get a new sweater, it's not going to fit in the bin. And that's all it takes is one extra sweater to ruin the whole system. So start with a little bit more space. Okay. But another
That's
example,
really helpful. Okay, yeah.
another example is the paperwork that comes in the house. Now, I am not a pro on this because I think the types of paper we've gotten over the years keeps changing. But what I found to be the most helpful, first of all, is you immediately put stuff in the recycling. Immediately. It does not go on the kitchen counter or the dining room table or whatever. You stand there, you look through it, it goes in the recycling. Then you have the stuff that's left that you need. And I've tried different things over the years, and my criteria for any organizational system is that it is aesthetically pleasing to me. So I'm not going to have like one of those beige metallic file folder drawers that are from old offices in my living room to have my mail sorted. But what I might have is some pretty folders that are on the sort of the household desk where I put it's a bill that needs to be paid, it's an invitation or something that needs to be responded to, or it's an article or something that I want to keep and get to later. So I have, it has to fit in one of those three folders. And if it doesn't, then I need to deal with it right then and there and then recycle the piece of paper. The key, of course, to those folders is that you have to put on your calendar to deal with it once a week. Otherwise, the folders just get bigger and bigger. But knowing that it's not just in a single pile on the counter or on the dining room table, it's actually dealt with. It's been touched once. It's been dealt with. It's been put in the appropriate folder. The goal is you don't want to touch it more than twice. So you have to deal with it the second time. Another thing are things like dog toys that are, plastic and not very attractive, and they've got slobber all over them, stuff like your cat toys, whatever. For me, it's I just want to have a really nice basket that they go in. I just have one place that's off in the corner. The basket itself is really nice to look at. That's all I need for me to feel like the living room's picked up. And then the kids stuff or extra dishes or Tupperware lids that don't have matching things. I mean, honestly, the less stuff you have, the easier it is to keep it neat and tidy. So no one needs 53 of anything. No child needs 53 doll shoes. No cupboard needs 53 pieces of Tupperware. Cull it out, and then it's just easier to maintain. So those are just some things that kind of come top of mind.
Oh, so helpful.
Very helpful.
Good, I'm glad.
I love what you said, to figure out where the friction is happening. What is the thing that's not working in this system?
Yep.
The shoes go here, but why don't the shoes ever end up there?
Yes.
What's the issue?
Exactly. Yeah. And oftentimes it's a conversation with other people you live with in the house. Because if they're not on board with your new organizational system, that system's not going to work. So they have to have buy-in. They have to be part of the conversation. And they have to be willing to try out something new. When my kids were little, they kicked off their shoes into a basket by the back door. And then when they got bigger and the shoes got bigger, I realized, okay, you're old enough now. We're going to have some little built-in cubbies over here. And we have a very tiny back door entrance. These little tiny cubbies that each shelf can fit 2 shoes. They come off and they go there. And they adapted that pretty well because they were already in the habit of always taking off their shoes and flipping in the bin. So, and the cubbies were in there almost like in right next to it. So it wasn't like I was having them to take them to a different spot or anything. It was just picking them up and putting in a shelf instead of throwing it in the bin. But like I said, you have to buy in. You can't impose. Unfortunately, I wish we could impose our organizational systems on everyone we lived with, but there's always pushback on that.
So this can come from anywhere. It doesn't need to be necessarily related to slow style, but we love to ask all of our guests, what does the good dirt mean to you?
Yes, I love this question, and I love the variety of answers that you get. And so I kind of want to answer it both literally and metaphorically. Literally, it means healthy soil because, like I said, I'm a gardener and I absolutely love the look and the feel and the smell and everything about healthy soil. I love to compost. I try to use natural pest control so that I know that whatever I'm growing is good for me and the biodiversity of our planet. That to me is good dirt. Metaphorically, I love the phrase good dirt. I mean, it can mean so many things. To me, I think it means making choices in life based on the quality and the integrity of the foundation underneath whatever it is we're choosing. So when your inputs are high quality, such as the wood or the stone or the cotton or whatever that makes up a product that you might be buying for your home, the end result, how the texture feels in your hands or how the paint actually looks on the wall at different times of day, they will be awesome because the foundation, the dirt of it, the soil, the thing that you start with, the materials that you start with are healthy, they're high quality, they were made well with good craftsmanship. So I think that every home, all of the stuff in our home, the goal is that it's all made with good dirt. And it's just such a great starting place.
That's great. That's really great to surround ourselves with things that have sources of integrity. What an awesome goal that is. Yeah. And to, try to clear our lives of the things that are not sourced out of integrity. Now, that's a big task. It's a lifelong task.
Yes, it is.
I very much like that as sort of a guideline. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a goal. Like you said, it's a goal. We can't do it overnight, but it's certainly a goal.
Very good. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And thank you for your time today. This was really, really interesting.
So yes, so how can people continue to learn from you and engage with you further? I know you have an online community.
Yeah.
You have a podcast. So tell us all of the places that we can find you and keep learning from you.
Yeah. Well, thank you for asking. And thank you so much for having me on. I love this conversation. And the three of us could talk for hours and hours and hours about all of this stuff. I would certainly want to
Yes,
pick your
yes.
brains as well. But yeah, so everything is under the words Slow Style Home. So it's slowstylehome.com. The podcast is called Slow Style Home, if you want to look it up. And I do have a book coming out. It's coming out in May through the publishers Gibbs Smith. And it is also called Slow Style Home. So hopefully I've made it really easy for people to find me, because all you have to do is remember that. And then you can find me on YouTube or on your podcast player of choice and on my website, and then the book that's coming out. So
Excellent. And what is it that you would like to leave our audience with today about your work in the world?
So I would like to say that everyone has within them the ability to create beauty. It's not just for people who have an eye for it or have a knack for it. And what is beauty gets to be defined by you. So my goal for everybody is just to have at least one spot in their home where they can just sit and look, and every single thing looks beautiful to them, and however you define it. And you have that ability within you to create it. We all do. And we all deserve it. I know that covering food and shelter, water, physical safety, we all need that. But after that, right after that, I would say beauty is there, because for as long as there've been humans, we have cared about our environment and how it affects us, how it affects our productivity, our mood, our happiness, our ability to connect with others. You deserve to live inside beauty in whatever way or means that you have available to you.
Wise words. Thank you very much. We appreciate it so much.
So inspired.
I'm so
Yes.
glad. Well, I'm so glad.
you so
Thank
much.
you so
Thank
much
you.
for having me on.
Thank you for tuning in, calling in, and spreading the good dirt. We love hearing from you. You can reach our listener voicemail at 443-459-1950. That's 443-459-1950. You can find this number in our show notes and in our Instagram profile.
This show is produced by Lady Farmer, a slow living lifestyle community, and the original music is composed and performed by John Kingsley.
For more from Lady Farmer, follow us on Instagram at We Are Lady Farmer. That's We Are Lady Farmer. Or join us online at www.ladyfarmer.com. We'll see you next time on The Good Dirt.
Goodbye.